Om Tavagatamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiritam Kalmasapaham Shravanamangalam Shrivadatam Bhuvikarnanti Bhurida Janaha. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. For those following along in the book, we're on page 104. This is the chapter Visit to Vidyasagar. And this was just within a few months of M's very first visit to Sri Ramakrishna, to August 5th, 1882. And they went to his house. For those who haven't been following, this Ishwara Chandra Vidyasagar was a very well-known figure at that time for his scholarship. He had started schools, he had written Bengali grammar, he was a great Sanskrit scholar, but more than that, he was a very generous and charitable man, and he helped so many people. He was interested in many reform movements, so he was a very, very well-known figure at the time. And Sri Ramakrishna never hesitated to try to meet whenever he heard of anyone who had any type of greatness, whether they were a great scholar, a great devotee, or leader of a religious movement, writer or poet. He had no hesitation. He didn't have that attitude that I'm a great spiritual soul, they should come and see me. He would go and visit them. So this is a visit to Vidyasagar's place. The name of Sri Ramakrishna was fairly well known among a certain section of the society in Kolkata at that time. He had been written up in the Brahmo Samaj newspaper, and many people knew about him. So this was a big occasion. Many of the neighbors and other people had come. Of course, M came with the Sri Ramakrishna, and there were also many who ordinarily came to see him, to petition him. So there was always a line of people who were waiting to request help for money, for a marriage, for a scholarship, for a school, for all sorts of different things. So we're right in the middle of a long conversation that Sri Ramakrishna has been talking to Vidyasagar. And we stopped where Sri Ramakrishna, he was talking about the path of knowledge and the path of love. And then he started talking about the vijnani. This is something that will come up over and over and over again. We'll have lots of opportunity to talk about that. Just in a very, very general sense, the vijnani is someone who has realized the highest aspect of divinity, has had the full realization or illumination, and lives in the world. We can say it's something like the Jivan Mukta. The Jivan Mukta is someone who continues to live in the world after attaining the highest illumination. So in a sense, the Vijnani is a Jivan Mukta, but Sri Ramakrishna will talk about several special features. How does the Vijnani live in the world, the realized soul? And when they come back to the world, they have a certain attitude, they have to have a certain sense of I. They will live transformed, that they'll appear to be like other people, but their anger will just be a mark of anger. There'll be lots of very important distinctions. So we start out, the Vijnani sees that Brahman is immovable and actionless like Mount Sumeru. This universe consists of the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. They are in Brahman, but Brahman is unattached. The Vijnani further sees that what is Brahman is the Bhagavan, the personal God. He who is beyond the three gunas is the Bhagavan with his six supernatural powers. Living beings, the universe, mind, intelligence, love, renunciation, knowledge, All these are the manifestations of his power. With a laugh, if an aristocrat has neither house nor property, or if he has been forced to sell them, one doesn't call him an aristocrat anymore. All laugh. God is endowed with the 6 supernatural powers. If he were not, who would obey him? All laugh. Now, this is a very big question. In Vedanta, we don't have much trouble with the concept of Brahman as nirguna, infinite absolute consciousness, saguna Brahman, Brahman together with this is Chit Shakti. The Chit Shakti is the main power that's attributed to Brahman, which makes Brahman appear to be the creator and the upholder and the withdrawer of the universe. So when we talk about Saguna Brahman, in the Vedantic sense, we're not talking about these 6 bhagas as the guna and Saguna Brahman. Well, now why do I say that? Because the concept of Ishwara, or the Brahman as the source of the universe, does not require Brahman to be personal. What do we mean by personal? When we talk about the personal God, in the Upanishads, there's really nothing that will serve or stand in the same place as the concept of Bhagavan, the personal God, that we get later, that we get in the Bhagavad Gita, we get in the Puranas, we get with the concept of the avatar. So how do we get from this idea that Brahman can be possessed of certain attributes or certain powers, to get from that to the personal God that we can pray to, that will hear our prayers, that perhaps has some sense of self-identification? So just to go back to this idea of Ishwara. Ishwara, from the point of view of the Upanishads, will not really be a personal God. It simply means that this Brahman has a power within it to project the universe, and then dwell within the universe, uphold the universe, and then withdraw the universe at the end. This doesn't require a concept of personal God that stops and thinks that let me do this and let me do that. We have this in Taittiriya Upanishad and others. We get this idea, which is not taken too literally by the commentators, at least Shankaracharya, is more of an allegory. When Brahman looks around and sees that there's no one else there, he's all by himself, and he feels lonely, and he says, oh, may I become many. This is not taken very seriously. How can Brahman be sitting down, and how can he look around if he has no eyes, if it's pure consciousness? So we don't take that very seriously. But this idea of Bhagavan is taken very, very seriously, that God will hear our prayers. Now that means that we've gone from this concept of the divine as being itself, from pure being, Sat, which is also pure knowledge and pure bliss, to a being, a particular being, some particularity there. And when we get to particularity, then we start adding name and form, and we also start getting into some competition, and we have our own special name and our own special form, and we think God should be like this and should be like this and like that. We get ideas like God will be compassionate, God will be loving, all of this. So this is not to say that there's anything wrong with this concept, but it's a bit of a leap. It's not exactly there in the Upanishads. Swamiji is very fond of saying that we can find the germ of these things. So we have, very often we'll have verses and statements that will try to show the oneness of a Brahman and the oneness of And it can be expressed in different ways, Paramatman or Ishwara and Bhagavan. Now, how do we try to understand this idea of oneness? And how do we understand this act of creation is coming out of an impersonal absolute reality? We start out with the impersonal. Brahman is impersonal. And from that, how do we get this concept of a personal God? And how objective is the personal aspect of the personal God? These are all questions for the philosopher. The devotee doesn't care very much, but for the philosopher. So I don't remember if I've done this before, but I want to go through something that to me is helpful in trying to understand how the impersonal absolute, Brahman, and the Ishwara, God is creator, and the Paramatman, that is the higher self, and the Jivatman, how these can all be one. Because for the Jnani, this Jivatman is really one with a Brahman, not a manifestation. The universe is a manifestation of Brahman, but the Jivatman is none other than Brahman. So it occurred to me one day that one of the best analogies, and of course it's not original with me, but one of the best analogies is of the Brahman as the sleeping individual. Now, when we're sleeping, and don't take this too literally, but when we're sleeping, there's only consciousness. There's no objective consciousness at that time. Now, Brahman will have self-awareness. It's not a perfect analogy, but the point is that the sleeping individual does not have any plan to have a dream, does not decide to have a dream, does not look around and think how nice it would be to create a whole universe. It just comes out of it. It emerges out of it. And if we want to ask why, we can say we don't really know. There must be something, we'll call it Maya. There must be something which causes the sleeper to become a dreamer. Now, the sleeper and the dreamer, we know are the same person. They're not two different people. When we wake up, we say, I fell asleep and I had a dream. The same I is the sleeper, the same I is the dreamer. Now, the only difference will be is that we'll use a different term. So now, instead of sleeper, we're saying dreamer. Instead of Brahman, we're saying Ishwara. Now, the creation of this universe is something that comes out of this consciousness. It doesn't have any existence independent of that consciousness. Now, what happens to the dreamer? This dreamer, who is still one with the sleeper and not really aware of himself as a dreamer, enters into the dream. And this will be as the Jivatman, which is really Paramatman, the higher self. So because when we wake up, do we talk about seeing things in the dream or having a dream? If it's having a dream, that means that we understand that this witness, witnessing the dream, at the time of the dream, the witness seems to be dwelling within the heart and soul of the dreamed individual. When we wake up, we'll say that no, that witness belonged to the dreamer. And then we'll have to conclude, well, there's a oneness there. I slept and I dreamt that I did this and that in the dream. They're all the same I. Now, if we say, well, what about this created universe? We'll say, well, that was a projection. That was a manifestation of consciousness. If we analyze it from the dream point of view, it seems to be independent. It seems to be real material and everything. But when I wake up, I say, no, I see. It was nothing but consciousness seeming to have taken some type of tangible form, chidghana, something like that. So we start out with this impersonal absolute reality as the sleeper. That's Brahman. Then this sleeper, as soon as the dream emerges, then the sleeper is no longer simply a sleeper, he's a dreamer. But he's also a sleeper. That sleeping aspect is always there. That's why that's the essential aspect, the nirguna aspect. So, same thing with the Ishwara. There's no Ishwara if there's no Jagat, if there's no universe. Swami Swanji was very fond of this idea of the woman and the mother. There's no mother unless there's a child. The birth of the child is the cause for the motherhood of the mother. The Jagat, this world, is what turns Brahman from Brahman into Ishwara. So as soon as the dream is there, then the sleeper becomes a dreamer. And the awareness gets transferred to the main character, which is me, in the dream. So that'll be this oneness of Brahman and Paramatman and Jivatman. Now what about Bhagavan? Where does this personal God come in? Because the individual in the dream may have some feeling that this dream world had to be created by someone or something. So there's some concept, there's some idea that God did it. And if we try to think, what is this God like? Then it's us who are trying to imagine what types of qualities are inherent in this divine being. It's almost like saying, okay, we understand this whole analogy, but we wonder, this sleeping individual that you're talking about, what is he like when he's awake? What is his personality like, or her personality like? So a bit of this personal God will be our superimposing qualities that we would like to think belong to the infinite absolute reality. So Swamiji, he'll give different types of statements that the personal God is the highest reading of the intellect, the highest reading of the human intellect, highest reading of the absolute by the human intellect. So it's not false, but we can come up with different ideas. Different cultures and different religions will have different concepts, and the name and the form, of course, is very much subjective. Subjective doesn't mean false. And Sri Ramakrishna gives all different nice illustrations when he talks about taking water from a lake. And we use different types of containers. If we use a bucket, the water takes the form of the bucket. If we want to give a name, different people of different cultures will have different names. He says that the Hindu will take it of a pitcher. The water will take the shape of the pitcher, and he'll call it jal. The Muslim will have a type of sack, a pouch, and the water will be filled in that, and he'll say pani. Then he says, are they two different things? The Christian may take a bucket and call it water. Are they different things? It's all the same substance. The name and the form are different. And then he talks about blocks of water that freezes into blocks of ice. What's the cause for them forming into a particular type of block of ice? He says this is the cooling influence, Him Shakti, of the devotee, the heart of the devotee. So we have actually two different ways of looking at this, more subjective and more objective. Sometimes he'll say, and Gita will read, that God will appear to us in the form that we most want to see. That'll be some objective appearance of God in that form. The other is that it's the desire of our heart which allows us to see God in a particular form. Now, the other way of understanding the personal aspect of God, what does it mean to be a person? I know what I take to mean to be, for me to be a person, is based on all sorts of superficial false ideas. We have to assume, if there's a personal God, that it won't be those types of things. It won't be having a particular body and a particular personality, this and that, but this idea of self-awareness. What is the real personality, this real feeling of I-ness? It goes back to that self-awareness. So we can easily understand that this Brahman is also, I am that I am, I know that I am. I have some self-awareness, but it won't be based on false, superficial things the way ours is. Otherwise, we can say that it's more a question of faith. But then we get stuck, because for Sri Ramakrishna, the Divine Mother, as a personal God, was so real and spoke to him that we're baffled and we don't know how to explain it. So sometimes we simply have to say that this personal God is something to be experienced. And this gets back to the vijnani, because the vijnani, as Sri Ramakrishna says, sees and talks to God. and not under some delusion, but has some direct access. Now, God dwelling in the highest level of the mind, these are, again, these are the things that we talk about and think about when we overanalyze. The devotee doesn't care for these things. And again, for Sri Ramakrishna, this personal God is something very, very real. For Swamiji, it's very real, but the superimposed attributes are subjective. Sri Ramakrishna also, are subjective. Another way of looking at it is that we're adding something to the idea of the impersonal absolute, which makes it more approachable and more lovable. But when we finally have union with it, it's the essential aspect that we're getting. The one illustration that I heard many years ago is that suppose someone wants to get intoxicated, and they have something, liquor to drink, but they don't like the taste of it, too strong. So they'll add some soda, or they'll add some lime juice or orange juice, something like that, and then they'll drink it. And it's very tasteful for them, and they'll get intoxicated. They'll get that divine intoxication. Now, is it the soda and the lemonade and the juice and all of that? No, it's the liquor. So when we have this experience of God in a personal form, the essential aspect, that Satchidananda, is what will raise our consciousness up. The other is the vehicle. It's what allows us to have enough love and devotion to have that type of experience. So we'll see that the vijnani can be of two types. That one, and it depends on what got us to the roof. Whatever, if we were devotees and we took a devotional path to the roof, we come back down, we'll live in the world with his eye of devotion. If we're more jnanis, say Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna, he always looked upon Shankaracharya as a fully God-realized soul who came with a special mission as a vijnani. But he was a vijnani of the jnani type. So for him, he kept his eye of knowledge. So he would say Chaitanya Deva kept his eye of devotion, and Shankaracharya kept his eye of knowledge. So this is this vijnani, and this is also how we can understand, yes, this sleeping Brahman who awakens with a personality that's also the same person, awake or sleeping or dreaming or becoming the actor in the dream. It's all one and the same person, divine person. We use the term person. We have to understand it's not the person that way we're a person. Purusha. Purusha can mean the same as a Brahman, but it also means a person, because there's some personhood, some sense of self-existence, some sense of some type of self-awareness, without it being the type of self-awareness we have that is based so much on particularity, on memory and different types of understanding and things like that. 6 supernatural powers. There are 2 different ways that we read about this. Sometimes they talk about 6 Ishwara gunas, these lordly qualities, and 6 Madhurya. There's 6 very sweet qualities. And in many religions we have this idea of justice and mercy, the two sides, 2 aspects of this personal God. Because one of the things God is supposed to do, and in Vedanta, he or she does it with the help of the karma theory, but one is to decide or to weigh and balance all of the good and bad things we've done to determine what the future existence will be, whether it's a heaven and a hell, or whether it's a type of rebirth. So we have these 6 madhurya qualities, love and devotion, compassion, all of that, and the 6 Aishwarya. That'll be strength and justice and dharma, things like that. There's a very nice concept that we find in Judaism. At the high holy days start out with the New Year Day, Rosh Hashanah, when We begin the 10 days of atonement for the things that we did in the past year that we regret, and we pray that the next year will be a good year for us, and that it ends with Yom Kippur. And they say that God sits on the throne of judgment or justice during those 10 days. Then on Yom Kippur, he switches over to his other throne of mercy, so that if we sincerely atone for our sins, then we're free, and then we have to change our ways after that. So this is another nice way of showing these two different aspects. So there's Bhagavan, these 6 Bhagas. Sometimes they're taken from this point of view of justice, and sometimes point of view of mercy. Just see how picturesque this universe is, how many things there are. The sun, moon, and stars, and how many varieties of living beings, big and small, good and bad, strong and weak, some endowed with more power, some with less. Vidyasagar. Now Vidyasagar is going to ask a question that we'll see gets asked many, many times. It's a very common question for the Brahmos, and a very common question for the Western educated people. He says, Vidyasagar, has he endowed some with more power and others with less? And then they had this idea that somehow God is responsible. If I have great power and you have less power, or vice versa, then we can say, well, we can blame God, that God should love all of his children equally, or her children. Why does God give one more power and give one less power? It's a very clear case of completely forgetting the idea of karma and rebirth and all of that. It's a very funny type of question, but they took it very seriously. And then they said, if that is the case, because they wanted to say that everyone has the same potential. If that is the case, then God can be accused of something they called Vaishamya dosha. That God is not impartial. This is the fault of partiality, playing favorites. Then God is playing favorites. He's giving favoritism to one and not to another. So Thakur was always a little bit amused and a little bit annoyed, because he thinks these are intelligent people. How can they ask this type of question? It's so obvious that some people physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, in all different ways, have greater power than others. Just a fact of life. So he's always a little sometimes put off by the question. Here he's getting it maybe for the first time, but after hearing it so many times, sometimes he'll be a little bit annoyed. And he'll always say, Vidyasagar asked me that same question. So he says, Master, as the all-pervading spirit, he exists in all beings, even in the ant. Okay, now we'll have a distinction that in terms of manifestation, is there a partial manifestation of God in one and a greater manifestation of God in others? No, there's 100% manifestation. God dwells fully and completely in each and every being. But the mind in which and the body in which God is manifesting, that there'll be a distinction. So it's not a question that God says, oh, let me partially enter this person and fully enter into that person. Nothing to do with that. It's a question of the covering. If we see the light shining very brightly in one lamp, and we see another lamp where we can hardly see any light, and we analyze very closely, we find the differences in the light shade. The one shade is very opaque. He's not allowing much light to go through, and the other is almost perfectly transparent, and that light is almost fully shining through. The same light. So it's not a question of greater or lesser manifestation of Brahman itself, but the manifestation of power will be restricted and limited in some cases. So he says, as the all-pervading spirit, he exists in all beings, even in the ant, but the manifestation of his power, so is Shakti Vishesh, he says. The power, how that presence can manifest itself as power. The same electricity in everything, but in some, it will utilize more voltage than in others. But it's the same source, the same divine source. But the manifestation of his power are different in different beings. Otherwise, how can one person put 10 to flight while another can't face even one? And why do all people respect you? Have you grown a pair of horns? Laughter. You have more compassion and learning. Therefore people honor you and come to pay you their respects. Don't you agree with me? So there's a question of partiality. First of all, we can say, why bring God into this? That we're born with our own limitations due to our past karma, and it's that which doesn't allow us to fully manifest whatever possible power there is. It's the tamas and rajas of the mind, which act as a lampshade to keep that light from going through. Why blame the light bulb? It's all a question of this lampshade. And what we're trying to do when we purify ourselves through spiritual practice is to allow that divinity to shine through more and more and more till it's unobstructed. So he asked Vidyasagar, don't you agree with me? Vidyasagar didn't say anything. Vidyasagar smiled. And the master continued, there is nothing in mere scholarship. The object of study is to find means of knowing God and realizing Him. Now, Vidyasagar was a great scholar, and Sri Ramakrishna had many great pundits who came to him, and he made a big distinction. He used to sometimes send Hridaya or others to meet a great pundit first, and he would say, go and find out if he has any renunciation and discrimination. And if so, then I'd like to meet him. Otherwise, he would say they're like mere straw. There's nothing to them if they study the scriptures and it doesn't have any effect on their personal life. If they are very worldly people, very proud people of their scholarship, then they haven't understood the scriptures at all. To understand the scriptures means that we have to develop a little humility, and we have to understand that this ego, this sense of pride, is false, and it's a great obstacle in spiritual life. So he would always check this Vidyasagar. He likes him. He's going to be a little tough on him because he likes him, and he sees tremendous potential. And he's very much Thakur is very much appreciative of the work that Vidyasagar does. He says over and over again that the work that Vidyasagar does is very good. It's born of sattva, but he doesn't realize that gold which is hidden within him. We saw before, Vidyasagar is quite a bit older than Sri Ramakrishna. I forget, was it 16 years? Something like that. Anyhow, at that time, that was a ripe old age at that time. And just like in Shankaracharya's Bhajo-vindam, that's not the time for an old man to be sitting repeating the rules of grammar. It's the time to be calling on God. So he's trying to, and this is what Sri Ramakrishna did, that whenever he met somebody, he would do two things. First of all, he would appreciate them, and he would try to encourage them to go along the spiritual path that was best suited for them. Second thing is that he would tweak things a little bit. If he saw that there was a little bit of one-sidedness or a little bit of too much lack of a liberal spirit or whatever, he would try to correct that. So we see very often when he's meeting with the Vaishnavas that he'll praise them very much. He'll talk about the love of God and Radha's love for Krishna. He'll praise them very much, but at the same time he'll say, try to understand everyone is calling on God only with a different name and a different form. Be a little more liberal-minded in your spiritual attitude. So he appreciates Vidyasagar, but he's trying to awaken him to something a little bit deeper and higher. So he says, there is nothing in mere scholarship. The object of study is to find means of knowing God and realizing Him. A holy man had a book. When asked what it contained, he opened it and showed that on all the pages were written the words Om Rama and nothing else. Now, what about us? We're constantly reading, and I think it's a good thing. We have to understand that when we read Gita, it's not the same as when Sri Ramakrishna is told by Totapuri that what is the meaning of Gita? You repeat Gita 10 times, Gita, Gita, Tagi, becomes Tagi. It becomes Tyagi, person of renunciation. So it means that one should renounce everything for God. For Sri Ramakrishna, that was enough. For us, we read Gita over and over again, and it gets more deeply impressed on our minds, and more subtle meanings come to us. So we shouldn't take it to mean that we shouldn't study the scriptures, but we shouldn't study them just for the sake of scholarship, just to memorize it so that we can quote verses and show off how knowledgeable we are, and be able to teach other people and everything. It has to be with some idea that we want to put these things into practice. And then, even if we're very established in our spiritual life, there's some joy that comes from reading the scriptures. So that's okay. It's when we get attached to the scholarly aspect of it that it becomes a problem for us. So he used to give the example of, the man was given a shopping list that you have to buy some sugar, some dish, some cloth, and he lost it and he couldn't remember what was on it. And then he searched all around. Then he saw it and he read it and he said, "Oh yeah, now I remember." And then he threw it away. He didn't need to keep it anymore. So if we could read the scriptures like that, and if after reading it once, then we say, now I know exactly what I can do, what I am to do, and if we could immerse ourselves in spiritual practice fully, 24 hours a day, then we would have no need of scriptures. We're in that in-between class, most of us, where study of the scripture is very important, especially the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. This is also a scripture. It's very, very helpful for the wisdom in it, but also the inspiration and the example. So there are many reasons also that we should do some scriptural study. Now we get Gita. What is the significance of the Gita? It is what you find by repeating the word 10 times. This is something Totapuri told him. It is then reversed into Tagi, which means a person who has renounced everything for God. And the lesson of the Gita is, O man, renounce everything and seek God alone. Whether a man is a monk or a householder, he has to shake off all attachment from his mind. So now we'll get this distinction between external renunciation and internal or mental renunciation. The real point of renunciation is not to be attached to things. If the householder can live in the world in such a way that he or she has no attachment to possessions, to name and fame, to title, to all of these things, then that person is a real person of renunciation. And if someone renounces everything and still has some attachment to name and fame and reputation, has some pride in everything, then that person is less of a person of renunciation. There's a very important verse, first verse of chapter 6 in Gita. There's a very strong verse. It's very strong because it uses this word sannyasi. Who is a real sannyasi? Generally we think you have to take formal vows of renunciation to be a sannyasi. The Gita says no. That person who performs this karya karma, who performs this duties and obligations without any attachment to the fruits, is the real sannyasi, and the person who simply gives up all worldly duties, puts on the ochre cloth, doesn't perform any ritual anymore under the guise of being a sannyasi, that person is not a real sannyasi unless there's also internal renunciation. So if there's external renunciation, there has to be internal. So this internal renunciation is the real thing. That's the real thing. The external is secondary. Now, of course, if someone at a young age doesn't get involved in the world, doesn't get married, have family, have a career, and all of that, then of course there's more scope for this very strong feeling of renunciation. So not to say that there's no advantage to the life of sannyasa, there is. But the crucial thing is this internal renunciation. Chaitanya Deva set out on a pilgrimage to southern India. One day he saw a man reading the Gita. Another man seated at a distance was listening and weeping. His eyes were swimming in tears. Chaitanya Deva asked him, "Do you understand all this?" The man said, "No, revered sir, I don't understand a word of the text." He wasn't a Sanskrit, no, he wasn't a highly educated person, a simple person. "Then why are you crying?" asked Chaitanya. The devotee said, "I see Arjuna's chariot before me. I see Lord Krishna and Arjuna seated in front of it, talking. I see this and I weep." So the feeling of the heart is the main thing. Bhavagrahi Janardana, a very well-known phrase from a very nice verse, but it means that God looks into our heart. He accepts our love. God doesn't care if we know all of the Sanskrit verses and we can recite things in all of that. It's the sincerity and the genuineness and authenticity that are the key things. Why does a vijnani keep an attitude of love toward God? Okay, so this is one way of living in the world. The point of the vijnani is that the vijnani needs something to hold on to, because the experience of divine joy in that state of oneness, that state of union, whether nirvikalpa samadhi or whatever we call it, is so intense that the mind is longing for that, and like a magnet keeps pulling up the mind. The vijnani, to a certain extent, has to try to keep the mind on a slightly lower plane, has to hold on to something. So there'll be some who are pure jnanis at heart, that they'll hold on to maybe some mission in life, maybe some desire to help others. That can be there for the jnani also. But the devotee holds on to this relationship. Sri Ramakrishna used to say in his case also that bhakta and bhakti, these are the two things that he held on to keep his mind down on a lower plane. That means the company of devotees. In his case, it meant his disciples and those who could appreciate his teachings, and the devotional attitude, to be able to sing and dance and enjoy the different devotional moods. This relationship, this is what he enjoyed. So on the one hand, he preferred this. You know, there's that beautiful Ram Prasad song where he says, "I don't want to become sugar, I want to taste sugar, I want to enjoy sugar. I want to enjoy that attitude." So on the one hand, this was something that was natural to him. He loved to have this feeling of being a child and being lying on the lap of the Divine Mother. How wonderful that feeling was. On the other hand, especially in the very early days, he had to force his mind down into that attitude. That's what allowed him to keep the mind on a lower plane, because that bliss of oneness was so tremendous for him. So it was a little bit of both. So he's talking about there's one type of jnani, a vijnani, who is devotional in nature. So why does a vijnani keep an attitude of love toward God? The answer is that I consciousness persists. Now, this I consciousness for the vijnani is what Thakur calls the perfectly ripe ego. We have this concept of this kancha ami and paka ami, this green or unripe ego and the ripe ego. For Sri Ramakrishna, it's not a question of getting rid of the ego or obliterating the ego, annihilating the ego, because he says that no matter what we do, this I consciousness is there. If we're sleeping, it disappears. If we're immersed in a book, we may forget for a moment. If we have nirvikalpa samadhi, then there's no I consciousness. But the second that we're aware of external things and aware of ourselves being aware of external things, there's some I consciousness. For him, ego simply means, what do I mean when I say the word I? What does it refer to in my mind? What is the content of that word? Aham. What is the content of it? So for a very worldly person, of course, it'll be identification with the body and all of our desires and all of our accomplishments and all of the lower external superficial things. In spiritual life, Sri Ramakrishna says, if we want to ripen this ego, the first thing we have to do is establish a relationship with God, which will help remove the sense of I from this body-mind complex and spiritualize it. So these are, of course, the different attitudes. For Sri Ramakrishna used to especially mention the attitude of the servant for the master and the child for the mother. So if I think of myself as a child of God, then immediately I'm thinking of myself in terms of spiritual terms. It's not the if it's the biological mother, I'm a child of my biological mother, then I'm a biological individual with body, mind, and senses that came out of that physical body of the mother. As soon as we start talking about, no, my sense of I-ness, my sense of being even a child, is that the Divine Mother is my real mother. This is a way of taking that unripe ego and ripening it. So we use this ripe ego, and in the beginning it's a question of aropa. We've spoken about this before. Aropa is superimposing because it's not natural. I still feel that I'm a human being with my own worldly, biological mother and father and everything, but we keep trying to tell ourselves, we try to convince ourselves of the truth of it, and it is true, but we don't know it. So we try to superimpose that idea, so that one day we'll realize, yes, that is the real truth. So we do it as a spiritual practice. We adopt an ego which starts to become like the ripe ego. But the ripe ego that allows the vijnani to live in the world is something different, because it's spontaneous and natural and real, and that's the real feeling. There's no effort involved. Well, in the state of oneness, one realizes that, yes, this is my eternal relationship. Even though I'm in a state of oneness then, when I come back down, I feel that is my eternal relationship. I am a child of God or a servant of God. So this is the ripe ego that allows the vijnani to live in the world. Now, is there any trace, any memory trace of this old ego? A slight bit. And this is what Sri Ramakrishna will talk about. He says, even after the attainment of knowledge, this I consciousness comes up. Nobody knows from where. You dream of a tiger, then you awake, but your heart keeps on palpitating. All our suffering is due to this I. So for us, this I means this I that is filled with pride and arrogance, and is very sensitive, that can bear it if somebody criticizes us. That I that makes us miserable. So this is what he's really talking about. The eye of the vijnani is not a harmful eye. In fact, he has so many illustrations, like the sword that's touched the philosopher's stone turned into gold. It can't harm anyone. It's too soft. It's just something to look at. It looks a little bit like a real sword, but it's just for show. So the ego is just for show. The anger is just for show. It's like a mark on water. It has the form of the anger, but it's not really anger. So he says, the cow, then we get a nice example. The cow cries, hamba, which means I. That is why it suffers so much. It is yoked to the plow and made to work in rain and sun. Then it may be killed by the butcher. From its hide shoes are made, and also drums, which are mercilessly beaten. Laughter. Still, it does not escape suffering. At last, strings are made out of its entrails for the bows used in carding cotton. Then it no longer says hamba, hamba, I, but tuhu, tuhu, thou, thou. I remember the first time I experienced this. I was living in it's kind of an out of the way part of Kolkata in those days, and the carder, the people who go and they make pillows and mattresses. They stuff them. They'll just take some cloth and they'll stitch it together and they'll stuff it with the cotton, but the cotton has to be separated and made into little small pieces, so they have a long bow, a long string, and when they go down the street, they don't yell out. the carter has come, what they do is they twang it. You hear this twing, twing, twing. So this is, this is the sound that Sri Ramakrishna is talking about. So then, there's no longer hamba hamba I, but tu, thou, thou. Only then are its troubles over. So that means that we stop saying everything is me, I. And then we say, no, everything is thou, O Lord. When that attitude comes, then we're free from the harmful effect of this ego. O Lord, I am the servant, thou art the master. I am the child, thou art the mother. Once, Rama asked Hanuman, how do you look on me? And Hanuman replied, O Rama, as long as I have the feeling of I see that thou art the whole and I am a part. Thou art the master and I am thy servant. But when, O Rama, I have the knowledge of truth, then I realize that thou art I and I am thou. The relationship of master and servant is the proper one. Since this I must remain, let the rascal be God's servant. Now, before we close, I want to talk a little bit about this statement that is attributed to Hanuman, because this, I think, sums up better than anything else the way we can harmonize or integrate or understand the three different schools of Vedanta in such a way that there's no contradiction between them. We can simply look upon them as different types of spiritual attitudes or different stages in our spiritual growth. This was one of the most important teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. We very often think of it in terms of the harmony of religions. And when we have that in mind, we think of old Hinduism and Islam and Christianity and Buddhism and Jainism and Judaism and Sikhism, all of the different world religions. But this term mat, joto mat toto pat, is also used for the different schools of Vedanta. So we really, I think, should understand this in a much broader sense. Not that all different faiths are simply paths to take us to God, but all different philosophical attitudes also. So here we have a very, very famous statement that deha buddhya, when I have this feeling that I am the body, tu dasoham. So this is Hanuman was supposed to have been brought before the assembly, and everyone is there. This simple monkey is kneeling down before Sri Rama, when he's asked that question, and he starts out like that. So he says, Deha buddhya, when I have this feeling that I am the body, then dasoham, then I am your servant, you're the master. Then he says, jiva buddhya, that there may be some times when I look upon myself as an individual soul, as a jiva. So jiva buddhya, tvad angshaka, then I feel that I'm a part of you. I am not separate, but we're not one. I'm a part. You're the whole and I'm simply a part. All of us are different parts. The sum total of all human souls. This is the Vishishta Dvaitavada. The first is Dvaitavada, that there's a separation but a relationship. Then he says, Atma Buddhya Tvameva Aham. When I think of myself as the Atman, as the real self, then you and I are one and the same. I don't find any difference. And then he says, Iti me nishtita matihi. This is my certain, final and certain opinion and understanding about this. So we see it one and the same person. Here it's Hanuman, but it can be anyone. One and the same person finds no contradiction between feeling sometimes a dualistic attitude, and at that time feels that you're the master and I'm the servant, you're the mother and I'm the child, you're the beloved, I'm the lover, any relationship. And sometimes thinking of himself or herself as the jivatman, individual soul, then feels this oneness, that I belong to you, I'm a part of you. But when even this feeling of individuality disappears, then there's nothing but oneness. Then there's no distinction. You and I are one and the same. So when he says that this is my firm, final, mature opinion, I take it to mean all three of them. Not simply that you and I are one and the same, but I think all three, because they represent three different moments in this scale of spiritual understanding. There's a very nice way, and we'll close with this, a very nice way of understanding this, very interesting interpretation of Tattvamasi. Tattvamasi, some people will take this as Tat and Tvam as a compound, and Tat having different meanings. One, Tattvamasi, will mean that I as an individual, or you as an individual, are one with that infinite absolute Brahman. The other way is this Tat will stand for Tasmin. So not that you are one with God, but you dwell within God. And the other is Tasya. That you're not one with God, you don't dwell within God, but you belong to God. So here also we have these three different schools of Vedanta. So we will stop here, and I will give the closing chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamananda Rupam Bhaktanukam Bhathur Vikraham Ishavataram Parameshamediam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace be unto all. A reminder that the 4th of July, we will have puja and a program online or live somehow, by the magic of the computers, from the youth group kids that will start at 11 o'clock on Saturday, 4th of July. If you go to our website, you'll see that there's a link for that. So you can just click on that and you can experience the whole puja at that time. And for Sunday is Guru Purnima. So we've given a link to a very nice talk that was given some years ago by Swami Sarvadevanandaji on Guru Purnima and the role of the Guru in spiritual life. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can click on that. That's actually available at any time, but we're posting that for the 11 o'clock talk. So thank you all, and we will see you next time.